Jay Leno has one of the most expensive motorbike collections in the world. You might think he doesn't have some of the strangest and most amazing bikes ever made, but what if we told you he is hiding them? I'm just really interested in these bikes. I always thought their gas tank and motorcycle were the most beautiful things in the world. Out of the normal rough. I use this one a lot. Jay's collection has bikes that changed the rules of speed, engineering, and design, as well as bikes with raw power and cutting-edge precision. Each of these bikes has a puzzle piece inside that tells a very shocking story. And most people don't know that the meanings behind some of the names in this collection will make you rethink everything you thought you knew about bikes. Number 10, the American Beast, the Crocker Big Tank from 1939. The 1939 Crocker Big Tank is one of the most famous bikes ever made. There's no need to worry if you like motorcycles and have never heard of a Crocker. These bikes are so uncommon and hard to find that some collectors never see one in person. But Jay Leno does have one. Not just any Crocker, but the Big Tank. It is one of the most expensive and well-known models ever made. Crocker bikes are like the Rolls-Royce of American motorbikes, which is what makes this bike so ridiculously unique. In the 1930s, Albert Crocker, a brilliant engineer who used to work for Indian Motorcycle, set out to make the fastest and most powerful bikes on the road. He did that, too. The 1939 Crocker Big Tank was a straight answer to the Indian and Harley-Davidson bikes. Also, guess what? It stood up to that test. The engine in this bike was a huge 1,000 centimeters V-twin. Today, that might not seem all that crazy, but back in the 1930s, it was like putting a very strong engine into something small and light. Back then, most bikes couldn't even get to 80 miles per hour, but the Crocker could go over 100 miles per hour. People who rode knew that if you were on a Crocker, no one could touch you on the street. Before there were muscle bikes, this was the strength bike. The name, Big Tank, comes from the fact that its fuel tank is too big for its body. It was a feature that stood out and was useful too. With more gas, you could go on longer rides, and the tank's curved, sculpted shape made the bike look tough. And it had a rough, mechanical beauty to it. It wasn't flashy at all. It was fast, and it looked fast. One thing that made this bike stand out was that Crockers were custom built for it. That means there were no two bikes that were the same. It's crazy to think about how each one is made to fit the needs of the receiver. Because of that amount of customization, each Crocker felt like a unique work of art. Hardly any Big Tank Crockers or Crockers were ever made, and only about 70 were ever made. Today, if one comes up at auction, it will cost more than $500,000. A few have even sold for more than 1 million coins. The Crocker that Jay Leno has isn't just for show, though. It's an important part of the past of motorcycles. He has said before that it is one of the best machines he has ever owned. That says a lot coming from Jay. The Crocker, on the other hand, was all about speed and tough construction. This next bike in Jay's collection, on the other hand, was the start of innovation and precise engineering. This is just the beginning of an amazing list of bikes. The third bike will truly blow your mind. The ninth bike is a 1969 Honda CB750 Sandcast. The revolution in Japan. Everyone who likes bikes knows that the 1969 Honda CB750 Sandcast changed the world of motorcycles in a big way. The Crocker was all about raw power and defiance, while the CB750 was all about accuracy, dependability, and changing the rules of motorbike racing. It was called the Bike of the Century because of how well known it is. So, why does Jay Leno care so much about this bike? To begin, the Honda made history. When the CB750 came out, big bikes were often temperamental, pricey, and scary. But Honda came along and changed everything. That was the start of the first real superbike in the world. There's a really cool story behind how the name Sandcast came to be, of course. Honda wasn't sure how the market would respond when they were getting ready to release the CB750. So, the first engine cases were made using a cheap method called sand casting, which is basically pouring metal into molds by hand. The early sand-cast engines were rougher and more unique than the later die-cast models that were made in large numbers. Today, sand-cast cases are very valuable because they were only used on the first batch of about 7,400 bikes. Also, Jay does indeed own one of those very rare originals. The CB750 was a beast for its time when it came to performance. The thing that it came with was huge for its time. It had a 736 cm inline-4 engine that made about 68 horsepower. It was as smooth as butter and could go as fast as 120 miles per hour. It had a front disc brake too. And while that might not seem important now, that was a big deal in 1969. It pretty much set a new standard for safety and performance right away because it was the first motorcycle made in the world to have it. It looked clean, useful, and just a little badass in terms of design. That inline-4 engine had 4 exhaust pipes that spilled out and gave it a unique look and sound. Honda made a bike that looked great, rode even better, and didn't break down every other weekend. People who had never owned a bike before were suddenly in line to buy one. For thrill seekers, it was fast enough, and for commuters, it was useful enough. It wasn't oily, didn't get too hot, and didn't need a mechanic staying in your garage. And for collectors like Jay Leno, having the sand-cast version is like having the plans for a whole new age. The 8th plane is a 1929 Scott Flying Squirrel called the Featherweight Racer. Jay has another bike that sounds like it came from a cartoon, but don't be fooled by the name. In its time, the 1929 Scott Flying Squirrel was a cutting-edge machine. It's still one of Jay's most unique machines. You'll understand why it was named the Flying Squirrel when you see it move. It moves quickly and is a little hard to predict. But what makes this British motorcycle that is almost 100 years old so special? To begin with, it's a 2-stroke engine. At a time when most motorcycles had 4-stroke engines, Scott Motorcycles was known for doing things in a unique way. They went all in with the Flying Squirrel. This 596 cm 2-stroke engine with 2 cylinders was really a beast. It moved quickly, smoothly, and had a top speed that would have surprised most people in 1929 who saw it go by. Also, it was cooled with water. The Flying Squirrel was way ahead of its time in 1929, when most motorbikes still used air cooling and could get too hot. The front heater isn't just for looks. It's a real feature that improves performance. There were many bikes like this one, but this one could cruise longer and cooler. Since Jay's is one of the later models, it has some improvements over the earlier ones, such as better suspension and a more streamlined look. The Flying Squirrel is unique, but its place in motorcycle history is what really makes it stand out. This wasn't a machine for the masses. It was made so that it would work well. Used a lot in races, hill climbs, and other long-distance games. Back then, it made people look. And people still can't go through it. Everyone who likes bikes knows that Jay has a thing for strange, forgotten machines. The Flying Squirrel is just that. It's rare, strange, and mechanically interesting. He could pretty much only trust that squirrel in his garage. 7th, the 1924 Ace XP4, a powerful American machine. People weren't just interested in this next bike, it scared them. The Ace XP4 from 1924 was also ahead of its time. So strong and mean that when it first hit the roads, Bean and even experienced riders had second thoughts. The XP4 is more than just a bike, so Jay Leno had to have one. It's likely one of the most audacious things ever said on 2 wheels. William Henderson started the ACA Motor Corporation. He is also the founder of Henderson Motorcycles. His favorite thing to do was make big, fast motorcycles with 1 cylinder. His goal when he launched Ace was bigger, though. That's how he made the XP4, a speed-focused experimental prototype that was made in a workshop just once. This beast was driven by speed. It had a huge 1,265 cm inline-4 engine that drove this beast. It was back then when most bikes could only go 40 or 50 miles per hour, but the XP4 easily went over 100 miles per hour. Don't forget that most roads were still dirt in 1924. Most helmets weren't required, and suspension was mostly just a nice idea. Still, the XP4 sped through the time like it was already late for the future. It wasn't just quick, it was also easy. A lot of people back then thought the XP4 was strange because it barely vibrated. The bike was very stable at high speeds because it had a long, low stance. On top of all those great qualities, it looked like a work of art going down the highway. But what really makes this bike special is that there was only ever one official XP4. Because Jay Leno is Jay, he was able to get his hands on a real replica made from original ACA parts and detailed plans. That's why it's the closest thing you'll ever find to the real XP4. And doesn't just leave it in his garage. He rides it himself. But if the XP4 is a strong American bike, the next one is very precise and German. The engine is as smooth as butter on hot toast, and it looks like a military tank for some reason. 6. The 1938 Zundap K800, which is the best car ever made in Germany. One of Jay Leno's motorcycles, the 1938 Zundap K800, looks like it came straight out of a movie about World War II. A machine that was built with such care that it looked like it was made by a group of watchmakers. The only flat four-shaft drive motorcycle that Germany made before the war was this one. Let's just say it appears. The Zundap K800 is a very powerful machine. For fancy street rides, this bike wasn't made. The German military is known for making things that last a long time and can handle rough conditions. Even though BMW's wartime bikes get more attention, the K800 is still one of the most important motorcycles of its time. What makes the K800 unique is its 798 cm flat 4 engine, which is mounted longitudinally and cooled by air. That engine wasn't just very strong at the time. It felt like silk. Many people like flat 4s because they are balanced and don't vibrate a lot. The K800 showed this by running quietly and smoothly, even at higher speeds. It had a 4-speed transmission and a shaft drive that connected the engine to the back wheel. It was very clean, very efficient, and way ahead of its time. About 20 horsepower is what the bike can do. That may not sound like much today, but keep in mind that this is 1934. For a bike that was meant to carry a full-size sidecar and maybe even a few soldiers or cargo, it did its job well. This bike looks great and deserves respect. It has a very clear German look from before the war. It has straight lines, matte black metal, visible parts, and a strong, squat body. It has a mechanical feel to it that is almost scary. When you look at it, you can tell right away that this bike wasn't made for fun. It was made to do something. Jay Leno has fully restored his model, but he has kept the rough, practical look. It doesn't have too much metal or paint that sparkles. Instead, it's just old wine. But the next bike in Jay's garage is all about speed, myth, and true British style. The Zundap K800 was all about strength and accuracy. It's the stuff of stories. It's sleek, black, and in 1948 it went 150 miles per hour. 5th, Vincent Black Lightning, John Edgar Special, the King of Speed, and Lightning, John Edgar Special. The world was slowly getting back together after World War II finished in the late 1940s. But while most motorcycle companies were still making pretty sensible bikes after World War II, Vincent Motorcycles made the shocking choice to go in a completely different way. He made up his mind to make the world's fastest motorcycle. That was the start of the Vincent Black Lightning. The John Edgar Special was the first Black Lightning that really broke the mold. There were only 30 of them made. This isn't like any other Vincent Black Lightning case. It was built in 1948. Customized by American race car driver and businessman John Edgar, and it was tuned to do one thing, break records. And make new ones. Yes, it did. Raleigh Free rode the John Edgar Special into history at the Bonneville Salt Flats, setting a new land speed record for the United States. As a result, the motorcycle is very well known. You may remember the famous black and white picture of a man in a bathing suit and shower cap lying flat out on a motorbike. That was Raleigh Free. That was the same bike. That picture is still motorcycle culture carved into stone. This Vincent Black Lightning is one of the most famous motorcycles ever made. Its thin, aggressive body hides a 998 cm V-twin engine that makes an amazing 70 horsepower. The engine had polished internals, high lift cams, and larger carburetors, all of which were tuned to give it the best performance. It had an extremely light frame made of magnesium and metal parts that made it lighter. Every part of this bike seems to be screaming, "Go faster." It wasn't made to go in a straight line either. The Black Lightning had a girdraic front fork, which was a mix of a girder and a hydraulic suspension. For its time, it handled fairly well. Huge twin drums and that beautiful all-black finish stopped the car. It wasn't just for looks. It was part of its Black Lightning persona, which was meant to scare and amaze. Jay Leno isn't just interested in collecting things when it comes to this bike. Having a piece of two-wheeled history that changed the game is what it's all about. Even though he has a lot of bikes in his garage, this one is one of the rarest because it's almost mythical. He doesn't ride it very often. With all of its historical importance, who would? But you can tell he respects it by the way he talks about the engineering, the history of Raleigh Free's Daredevil ride, and how it came from a time when bravery and technical genius were the only ways to get fast. It all makes you feel cold. This bike did more than just break speed records. It also led to a race to make the best motorcycles. After the Black Lightning made a big splash, everyone wanted to play. If there was ever a bike that could compete with the Vincent Black Lightning in terms of style, power, and prestige, it would be the 1930 Bro Superior SS100. Jay Leno loves this bike, and it's also known as the Rolls-Royce of motorcycles. The fourth one is a 1930 Broke Superior SS100. The perfect ride for a gentleman. Jay Leno's 1930 Broke Superior SS100 is more than just an old bike. It's the height of style and a testament to the best of British workmanship. This was the elite's bike. The one you bought if you had a lot of money, great taste, and a strong need for speed. It wasn't just hype either. In fact, the SS100 lived up to expectations. George Brough built it in Nottingham, England. And each SS100 that left his workshop was put together, tested, and made just right for the buyer. But a lot of people don't know that it had to prove itself first, before it even got to the customer. Before they were allowed on the road, each motorbike had to pass tests at 100 miles per hour or more. That's how the name SS100, which means Super Sports 100 miles per hour, came. Because of his death, the first real studies were done on motorcycle helmets and preventing head injuries. So, yeah, the SS100 not only changed how bikes were made, it also changed the history of motorcycle safety. It's easy to see why Jay Leno loves this machine so much. And you can't blame him. The fact that it was built by hand, has a famous history, and has raw power all make it feel alive. The next bike in Jay's lineup breaks all the rules, while the SS100 is all about luxury and tradition. There is a radial airplane engine inside the front wheel, which makes it very strange and unique. The third one is a 1922 Megalola Touring. The occurrence of the front engine. Imagine riding your motorbike down the road and everyone is staring at it. Not because of the paint job or the sound of the exhaust, but because your engine is spinning inside the front wheel. That's what makes the 1922 Megalola Touring so special. And yes, Jay Leno has one in his garage like it's nothing. Not only is the Megalola hard to find, it's also one of the strangest motorcycles ever made. Fritz Gockrell and his team made it in Germany in the early 1920s. Most people don't remember that the name Megalola comes from putting together the first two letters of the last names of the people who designed it, Michner, Gockrell and Landgraf. They do remember that the radial engine was in the middle of the front wheel, right in the middle. The Megalola has a radial engine with 5 cylinders that is placed inside the hub of the front wheel. Moving it only moves 640 centimeters. The crazy thing about it is that the whole engine turns with the wheel. It sounds and feels like a small airplane engine, but it's not flying, it's just rolling down the road. That engine turns about 6 times for every wheel turn, and it makes about 14 horsepower. It was kind of like riding a science project. Even stranger is the fact that there is neither a clutch nor a transmission. That's right. To get the mola going, you'd have to push it and jump on it like a big kick scooter. You would twist the throttle and hope for the best once it was moving. It was a whole different story when it came to stopping the motorbike. The brakes were only on the back because the front engine was spinning, making it impossible to put a stop there. But the Megola worked, even though it had a crazy design. It wasn't even a one-off prototype. It really raced. A sports version of the Megola even won a German Grand Prix and a few other races. The reason Jay Leno loves this is exactly what you'd think. We don't know much about motorcycle engineering, but this one is unique and makes us question everything we think we know. About 2,000 Megolas were ever made, and today there are thought to be no more than 10 that are still fully functional. But next is a bike that is the very first motorcycle in American history. The first small, simple, and famous motorcycle that became famous. The second one is the 1902 Indian Camelback. The start of motorcycle riding in the United States. The 1902 Indian Camelback is an important piece of two-wheeled history. This motorbike is different from others. It's the first model made by the Indian Motorcycle Company, which is the oldest motorcycle brand in the United States. Also, Jay Leno has one of them, which is pretty cool. Because if you don't own the first motorbike, how can you call yourself a motorcycle guy? During the 1900s, motorbikes were still a very new idea. In order to make something that could go faster without having to pedal as much, some inventors were trying to add engines to bicycles. Indians did it first, though, and they did it right. The unique gas tank on top of the back wheel that looks like a camel's back gives the 1902 Camelback its name. It looks like a backpack on a bike, but it did a lot more than that. It was really cutting-edge technology back then. It was a tiny motor with one cylinder that made 1.75 horsepower. It was built by the famous engineer Oscar Hedstrom. People used to ride horses or bikes, so the fact that it could go about 25 miles per hour was pretty cool. Not only was this bike historic, but it was also built very well for its time. The engine was put low in the frame, which helped keep the bike's center of gravity stable. That made it easier to ride and handle than many of its early rivals. Also, it had a belt drive instead of a chain drive, which made upkeep easier and the machine more reliable. The one owned by Jay Leno has been beautifully restored, right down to the leather saddle and wooden wheels. But what really cool about Jay's Camelback is that you can ride it. There's something very lovely about seeing this old machine still working after more than 100 years. The Camelback is unique not only because it was the first, but also because it set the stage for everything that came after. It was this event that started Indians' racing success, their rivalry with Harley-Davidson, and eventually the whole motorcycle culture in the United States. Who knows where motorcycle riding in the US would be without this simple little machine? Let's not forget how rare this motorcycle is either. A very small number were made in 1902, and most have since been lost or destroyed. So, having one that works is like having a piece of the Declaration of Independence. The only difference is that it still runs on gas and makes cool noises when you ride it. It's clear why Jay Leno cares so much about the Camelback. There's nothing flashy or fast about it, but it's just pure motorbike history in its purest form. The next motorcycle in Jay's collection, on the other hand, is nothing like the Camelback. The animal in question is a race-bred unusual British animal from after the war. Its name sounds like it should be in a cartoon. The first one is the E90 AJS Porcupine. The legend of racing. The E90 AJS Porcupine is one of the rarest and most sought-after motorcycles in Jay Leno's collection. Don't feel bad if you've never heard of this bike. It's one of those machines that sounds like something out of a story. The famous British animal comes from the time after World War II and changed the rules of the game and made racing history. You might ask, why the name Porcupine? It has to do with the AJ's spiky and complicated cylinder heads that he put on this bike's engine. When it came out, this was one of the coolest race bikes ever. Besides having a one-of-a-kind look, it was also ahead of its time in terms of tech and performance. Because it was so new at the time, the E90 AJS Porcupine has a 500 cm parallel twin engine. A single-cylinder engine was what most bikes had in the late 1940s. It was unique in more ways than one, though. Instead, it had a double overhead cam shaft. A trait that was way ahead of its time that made the bike run more smoothly, with less shaking, and faster than its rivals. The bike also had huge, thin metal heads that went over the cylinders and looked like porcupine quills. These fins not only helped keep the engine cool, but they also gave the bike a very unique look. At first glance, the AJS Porcupine stood out as being unique. Not just because of the name, but also because the bike itself seemed powerful, like it was made to tear up a racetrack. It also broke the tracks, of course. There were many famous races that the Porcupine took part in, such as the Isle of Man TT and the Alter Grand Prix. People on the AJS team, like Les Graham, rode the bike to victory in the 1949 World Championship. That's right, the AJS Porcupine won the very first 500 cm World Championship. This bike wasn't made for comfort, it was made for speed and accuracy. It was very small and simple, with just enough space for the most important things. The rider was hunched over and sitting close to the tank. The rest of the bike was focused on speed. There are now only a few E90 AJS Porcupines left in the world. Even fewer of those are in good enough shape to run. Leno has one of the nicest ones around, and he keeps it in perfect shape so that everyone who sees it can admire it. Jay has a lot of different things that he collects, not just bikes. He really keeps history alive. Jay probably loves this bike even more than the fact that it's a real piece of racing history. It also shows how innovative and brave Britain was after the war, when it was trying to get its reputation back on the world stage. What do you think? If you could ride any of these famous bikes, which one would it be and why? Leave a comment below and tell us. Click on the next video on your screen if you like this one. Like this video? Please subscribe to our channel to see more and get new videos.